The circus is really the old feudal environment. It has very important qualities that are opposite to industrial society. In the circus, you have closeness to animals, which you had in pre-industrial society. In the circus, you have the extended family tribal structure, which you had in pre-industrial society. In the circus, you have the human scale of objects, that man is in fit measure to his environment. He isn't dwarfed by the colossal things, and he's man in power over environment. He's the tightrope walker who can climb across the razor's edge and not fall off. It's a celebration of man's power over his environment rather than the reverse of the urban environment where the whole thing is collapsing in him and man feels crushed and dehumanized. Also, there's a sensuous culture of the body, of natural man in a natural landscape of propagation and joyous sexuality. Amazing creatures they were in Louise's eyes, so white and pink of complexion, so scant of dress, and so demonstrative of leg. These are the women riding on the horses. This is the miniskirt, long before the miniskirt comes in. And there's the whole sense that in Victorian society, the skirts are down to the ankles, but when you go to the circus, there is naked leg in all its erotic magnificence. So that there, too, sensuality is really very important and non-industrial. And ultimately, the misfit. The most fascinating thing about the circus is it's a society of misfits. It's the fat lady and the thin man, and being a misfit makes you fit. And so the misfits form the true community. So there is no alienation. People come together, and the very thing that makes them a square peg in a round hole elsewhere is what makes them belong into this new community. So that in this sense, Dickens' circus is really prophetic. Think of the films of Bergman, of Fellini and Antonioni, of the La Strada, and think of how important the whole role of the vagabond in the circus is. In this sense, the circus is even older than industrial society. When we take the vagabonds, the people who move, we're going back to Father Abraham and the seasonal round, by which Father Abraham moved from Haran, went up and gathered the wild grasses, and then took them down into Egypt, and went through this triangular rotation, and he had no place. We're going back to the hunters and gatherers who lived in the seasonal round and lived in an organic clock. When the fish were running, they were where the fish run. When the wild berries were flowering, they picked the wild berries. When the wild grasses came in, they picked the wild grasses. They had no home. All nature was their home. The center was everywhere and the circumference nowhere. Now, many anthropologists are beginning to conceive the idea that actually civilization is a mistake, and that very advanced cultures of high consciousness are possible, and that the hunting and gatherers had an astronomy and a culture much beyond our beliefs. And many of them are predicting now that as industrial civilization is grinding down to its apocalyptic close, that we're going to revert to a society of hunters and gatherers, and that hunting and gathering is the only real stable society. Now, if you read the Book of the Hopi, you'll find that that's the message, that those who stay put and stay in one place and settle down and become urban are sinners. And those who follow and move and follow the dictates of the Lord and become perpetual migrants are the ones who are close to the bosom of God. If you look in the Old Testament, you can see there's a profound ambivalence between pastoral values and urban values, and there's very much a celebration of the nomadic kind of life. And the original God before the temple is a God of tents. And the God himself in Kings 1-10 is showing ambivalence about moving into the temple of Solomon. And he said, "For inasmuch as I have always been a dweller in tents, why should I move into your temple?" And he says, "If you will sign a covenant with me to say, you will never forsake my laws, you will never become an urban man and be caught up in the idolatry of urban man, I'll move inside your temple." And so Solomon signs the covenant, but he never observes it because the temple is built by Canaanites and it's designed by Canaanites, and eventually he ends up in his old age lighting candles to Ishtar, and Yahweh knew it was going to happen that way. And so the prophets come in to excoriate the temple and the cities, and you get Amos, the shepherd, the wanderer, coming in to say, "I abhor the excellencies of Jacob, I will smite the summer palace with the winter palace, the smoke of your incense offends my nostrils." So what you have then, in a sense, is that the vagabonds are not even pre-industrial man, they're the oldest culture on the earth. And they have been living at the marginal societies of agricultural man and industrial man, and after we've gone into extinction, they will still be here, wandering around in their caravans, living with the organic season and owning no space, but being owned by space itself. So that we can see now that we're coming to the full limits of all that industrialization is about, the prophetic quality of the vagabonds and the prophetic quality of Dickens in recognizing them as an archetype is even more relevant than ever before. And this is why artists who have come after Dickens, like Fellini, have focused on this metaphor and exploited its full archetypal power in film after film. Now perhaps as we move from industrial culture of meaningless work to a mythic and sensuous culture of meaningful play, then we'll begin to realize the possibilities in a new artistic way. Work, when compressed into just 2 hours a day, becomes an artifact, becomes part of one's spiritual sadhana, and work becomes play. Because the ultimate thing of this non-industrial mentality is to say, as the Indians do, that all the universe is Leela, or in the words of William Blake, energy is eternal delight, and eternity is in love with the productions of time.